What kind of large-scale jobs have historically been passed down in families? Do you know how your characters will make clothing if they do not have a way to buy them? What skills do modern people use in rural life? What can leave a giant splinter in your character's arm? Find out on this episode. Welcome to Writing Rule with Allie, the Fiction Writer's Weekly inspiration station for rural life and lifestyles. From historical to post-apocalyptic, helping you bring your rural stories to life. I'm Allie, and this is episode number 73, 10 Generationally Passed Skills, Part 3. Stick around to the end to find out all the ways things could possibly go wrong. Now, let's get into this. Rural life has many skills that are passed down from one generation to the next. Some are passed down to everyone, and others are passed down to individuals who want to learn them. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and even older siblings can teach these skills. Today, we will cover 10 more. Number 21. Hunting. Hunting has been around since caveman times and will be around after the apocalypse. Humans need meat to consume the amount of protein we need. Sure, there are few and far between exceptions, but these are few. Hunting in modern times includes guns. Where I am from, there is a hunting season when you are allowed to go hunting for certain animals. Your character will need tags. Tags are bought at the store and called into the conservation agency afterward. Other places have you bring the animals in to be inspected. Look up the laws of the place that you are writing because states are different and sometimes even counties are different. Remember, there is also a youth hunting season. I know children as young as 5 that go deer hunting each year. Almost all teenagers will go hunting every year. When they are young, they will need a parent to go with them. Once they are old enough to attend hunter safety classes, they will be allowed to go alone, but only if the parents allow it. Bows and arrows are still used in modern times and have their own hunting seasons also. Historically, this was very popular, and before guns was the main way that people went hunting. This can be done by stealth walking through the woods, or by waiting for the characters to come closer to the place that your character is hiding. Trapping is sometimes lumped in with hunting. However, for this list, we have these on separate categories. Outside of how to safely use and aim weapons, there are other skills. Tracking is a learned skill, but on this list is also going to be grouped outside of hunting. Some people also inspect the poop. Yeah, you heard that right. An example of this is if you find dog poop with lots of fur in it, it's likely a wolf or a coyote, as they will be the most likely to be eating fur. Being able to spot a game trail and how big the game will be is an important part. A game trail just means that the animals have moved through there a lot. Normally, the ground in a line will have little to no grass. This doesn't have to be a straight line, and in many cases is not a straight line. The grass, the branches, and other vegetation will seem to have a hole in it, as if everything just kind of grew around that hole. If it's a small hole of about 6 inches high, that means that this is a small game trail. If it's larger at 4 feet high, it might be a deer. The animals that move through there often will make the hole about the size of their shoulders and height. Number 22, carpentry. Next is carpentry. This is the designing and building of homes, barns, silos, or other large projects. Basically, architecture. These are usually done with the most advanced tools that are available to the people in that era. However, this is not always the case, as evident by the Amish today. Historically, this will normally include knowing how to make boards from trees and how to angle a roof based on mathematical formulas. That said, they could also just cut the board and then use that one board as a stencil to where to cut the other boards. People that learn about carpentry are often very good at this and can look at something and work out what is wrong and how to fix it in their heads, whether someone made a mistake or they are just working out what needs placed there. There are stories from ancient China and medieval Europe of builders who calculated the exact number of bricks that they needed for their project and then ordered one extra. And they had the one extra at the end of the build still. Number 23, large engines. Learning how to work on large engines is a more modern skill. The first tractor, that was only called a steam-powered engine at the time, was invented by John Fordich, probably messed up that pronunciation, in 1892 in Iowa. In 1917, Henry Ford made the first model for mass production that was affordable and reliable. I can't say how fast they caught on, but I do know that according to my in-law, they had a tractor back in the 1930s, and most of the farmers did too. That said, it wasn't until about the 90s that most farmers, at least in my area, stopped having horses just in case anything happened. Trucks are a large part of everyday life for rural people. Whether they are hauling hay, animal feed, or stock trailers are trailers that safely move the animals from one place to the next. They are used very often. Many farmers use manual trucks. Tractors are manual, and taking a manual truck into town to get feed will stop most truck thieves, because most city people no longer know how to drive manuals. In fact, most kids learn how to drive the farm truck and the tractor while helping and are more than ready when they are old enough to get a driver's license. With them being so important to a rural life, learning how to work on them is just something that is taught. Changing oil, spark plugs, and air filters are easy and are taught the same way that you teach changing a tire. As in, it's just part of learning how to drive. People who pass the skill on will also teach those wanting to learn how to change starters, alternators, fuel pumps, gas tanks, belts, water pumps, and so much more. Number 24, fishing. Just like with hunting, fishing brings in food and gives our characters needed protein. This can be learned in many ways. Native Americans used many kinds of fishing traps and nets. Some used fishing spears too. I also remember using trout lines as a kid. Those go back for generations upon generations. FYI, trout lines are not for hunting trout, but for catching catfish. The fishing rod is believed to date back to 4000 BC, and the first fishing reel is believed to come from China in roughly 400 AD. First fishing nets date back to roughly 2700 BC and were made of natural materials like horsehair. Each of these items take skills to learn and use, and time and patience to learn the fish and their habits as well. That's why passing it down has been so important. There are even biblical records of fishermen, the ones that did this for a living, passing down those skills to the younger generations and specifically mentions to their children. Another skill mentioned is boating skills. This would apply in some areas and not in others. Near the ocean would be very different from a stream that you can swim across. Just like a lake would be different from a river that is too shallow for a canoe. While it likely goes without saying, fish are a great food source. Food is something your character needs. While catching them is important, descaling them is also important. However, for fish like catfish, they don't have scales and will be skinned like a game animal. Number 25, herbal medicine, aka herbal remedies. Historically, medicine was not available to everyone, assuming that it was even invented when your character was alive. However, each area and people group have their own herbal medicines. This could depend on what's available to the person. Antarctica will have far less choices of plants, if they have any. I will give you some examples that I know off the top of my head, but if you're doing a specific people group, you will want to search what they used. For asthma attacks or breathing issues such as croup, my grandmother-in-law would boil water and then place a pot holder under it so they could place it on the table beside a chair. And the person would then get under a blanket that is placed over the pot so all the steam would come directly up to them and they would breathe that in for at least 15 minutes. I can tell you that this worked for my younger child with croup. I remember her getting under the blanket with him to stop him from burning himself because he's only about a year old, and she just sang songs to him the whole time. I don't know how well it would work for asthma. The women in my family used to deal with cramps by getting raspberry leaves and making tea out of them. Many companies today still sell raspberry tea for this very purpose. The leaves also contain iron, which many women are lacking during that time of month. Seasonal allergies were treated by eating 1 teaspoon of honey daily from the very region that the character lives. This is believed to work like immunotherapy does today. Immunotherapy is being exposed to small amounts of the thing that you are allergic to help you build an immunity. The small amounts of pollen in the honey is believed to help. A cough remedy I heard having been sworn by was to take an onion and cut it into thin layers. Then sprinkle sugar liberally between the layers and set them all together in a bowl for half an hour. Place it off to the side. When you come back, there will be a liquid in the bottom of the bowl. More can be squeezed out. Then there to give teaspoons of the sugary concoction. I know people who do this and will not use anything else. Others also use onions on the bottom of their feet with a sock over it for coughing. We use mentholatum cream in the same way on the soles of your feet for croup coughs, and it helped, but it does not cure it. There were far weirder things. In ancient Egypt, Egyptian women used to mix leaves with honey and animal dung and place them inside themselves for birth control. Placing leeches around a wound was common in medieval times. Also, using maggots to treat gangrene has been reported to come from the American Civil War. However, many tribes were using this long before that. The Mayans and the Aboriginal tribes in Australia are two of the many tribes. Number 26. Archery. Archery has been handed down since caveman times. This is a skill of making a bow and arrow. What to use, what not to use, how to best care for them, how to make them more effective, how to make arrows, what to look for in the arrow that might indicate that it is getting ready to splinter. Splintering is dangerous and potentially fatal to your character. How to make fletchings. Those are the feathers on the end of the arrow. And how to place them on the arrow to both stay and to get the best control for where the arrow will be going. On top of how to make it, there is also how to use it. These would have been used for hunting, but there are other things. The strength needed for the longbow in medieval battles was so great that the arms of the men were huge, and they can tell by a person's skeleton if they shot the longbow. The Mongols taught their warriors how to shoot from horseback during battle. And let's not forget about the crossbow for battle and the different skill sets for how to use it. These skills take time and repetition to learn, but much like a bicycle, you'd never really forget this skill. Also, wooden arrows need to be carefully inspected often. They can form cracks, and if they shoot them after the cracks form, there is a good chance that it will splinter. If this happens, it almost always ends up going into the forearm or the hand of the person holding the bow. This can be painful and also crippling. If you write historical, this also risks infections. Number 27. Crocheting and knitting. Crocheting and knitting are very similar. Both of them use yarn, or in the historical context, cotton, wood, silk, or similar materials. Both make things such as clothing and blankets. Both also are about the same skill level to learn. The big difference between these two is that knitting is done with 2 needles, aka the long, bluntly pointed sticks. And crocheting is done with 1 crochet hook, aka a long stick with a blunt hook on the end. I'm sure I'll find someone who yells at me about the differences in the comments and gets super technical, but my grandmother did both, and that's literally the only difference that I ever found. The things that can be made with this are, but are not limited to, clothing, jackets, baby booties, aka shoes, blankets, dolls, other toys, curtains, doilies, Christmas ornaments, dog clothing, wall insulation, pot holders, dishcloths, and so much more. Number 28. Fire making. Fire making is a skill everyone needs to know in rural life. In modern times, knowing how to safely use a propane pilot light can be the difference between life and death. Also, fumes and flash fires need to be taught so that your character doesn't burn off half of their hair like I did. Only the front half. The back half was fine. Historically, there was mostly just wood to burn, with a few exceptions. Learning how to make a fire with flint and steel is a learned skill, and I have an episode on that. I still can't do a hand drill. That's when you twist one stick between their palms back and forth so fast that it makes an ember. I just end up with blisters. Also, knowing how to safely make a fire is important. Burning down a home or making a forest fire is not wanted today, but historically, there was a really good chance that there was not a fire department to call for help. Your character's neighbors might come to help, but that could be hours before there is help. Another thing to know is how to do this with as little waste as possible. An example would be if your character is using matches, they might not have the money to buy many. If they run out, they will be very cold. The same could be said about a lighter. It will run out of fluid at some point. However, with a lighter, you still have a tiny flint and steel to make a spark, and that will give your character another way if they know how. Number 29. Using tractors, tillers, and other farm equipment. Tractors are clearly a new invention, and the first popular mass-produced tractor was the Fordson, an invention of Henry Ford in 1917, which, as of the time of this podcast, was 107 years ago. Learning how to operate, maintain, fix, and even clean this equipment is important. Likely the most overlooked thing on the tractor that will need to be replaced from time to time are the tires. Yeah, those aren't fun to change. There is also the regular upkeep that is similar to that of a car. Change the oil, the air filters, check the radiator levels, etc. Most tractors are manual tractors, which means that they have a clutch, not just the gas and the brake that an automatic car does. A lot of farms have equipment that goes behind the tractor that is pulled. This includes, but is not limited to, brush hogs, tillers, hay balers, hay rakes, plows, disc plows, rakes, and so much more. The front may or may not have a bucket on it. I've had both. Personally, I like the bucket best, as it can not only be used for the normal work that you would think of, but I've used it for taking the engine out of cars to replace it with a new one. It's a ton easier than having to try to use a cherry picker. In this case, that's a special engine pulling equipment, and trying to use that in the dirt because we didn't have a concrete pad to work on at the time. There are many tools that are hand tools: shovels, rakes, rock rakes, axes, sledges, hammers, mattocks, and a huge list more. There are also modern tools that come in handy too. The wood splitter, push tillers, wheelbarrows, chainsaws, wood chippers, and a whole lot more. Number 30. Weather predictions. Weather predictions are something that has been done since the beginning of mankind. Some are right, some are wrong, and some are a whole lot of fun. My father always talked about how his mother knew that the weather was going to be like not just tomorrow, but 6 months from now. I was fairly young when she passed away, but I do remember her saying that if it thundered in December, it would snow in May. Now, I've watched this over my lifetime, and while it's not always right, most of the time it is. At least my area here in Tornado Alley. Around here, people also look at the pecan tree nuts to tell what the winter might bring. It is said that if you split it open and there is a spoon shape, that it will snow that winter. If there's a fork shape, it will be a mild winter. And if there's a knife shape, it will be a bitterly cold winter. My husband swears by it. Personally, I don't know enough about it to give my real opinion. Woolly bear caterpillars' colors are said to predict the weather also. The more brown in the middle, the milder it will be. The more black on the outside, the worse it will be. Cattle, dogs, and wild animals are also watched as the winter approaches. If they grow thick coats, or thicker than normal coats, it's believed that the winter will be cold. There are also so many cloud weather predictions that I cannot even begin to name them all here. However, the most well-known one in the entire world is the sailor's saying, "Red at night, sailors delight. Red in the morning, sailors take warning." Basically, if there's red in the morning, it will rain or storm. If there's red at night, the weather will be calm. I don't know anyone who doesn't agree with the saying. Fun fact! A 2024 survey of Americans showed that 36% of adults could crochet, and that 51% of those who were surveyed could also knit. Now time for everyone's favorite part, what could possibly go wrong. Before we get into the best part, if you enjoyed today's podcast, I hope you will take a minute to follow, rate, and review on your favorite podcasting platform. And if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe and hit that like button. Drop me a comment. I love to hear from you and answer questions. Don't forget to share with a friend. As always, you can find this episode's show notes and helpful links to learn more on my website, alleyhart.com. And now, for everyone's favorite part. Likely to go wrong. Your character plans their winter off a plant that they believe predicted a mild winter. They do all of their winter preparation off of this prediction and do not add any just-in-case precautions. However, the plant was wrong. And by the end of winter, they run low on food and firewood, leaving them cold and hungry. Also likely to go wrong. Your character has company, and the company starts a fire, but they are not careful with how many matches they use to make the fire, wasting several. This not only angers your character, but means that they will need to find alternative ways to make fire to stay warm. Also likely to go wrong. Your character is learning how to throw a fishing net off of a boat. As they throw it, the weight causes them to lose their balance and they fall overboard. Possible to go wrong. Your character tries to steal a tractor. However, they get caught because after they get it started, they can't figure out how the clutch works. Also possible to go wrong. Your character didn't check the wooden arrows before using them. The arrow has a split in it, and when they try to shoot it, it cracks, and half of it goes shooting into the forearm of your character. Possible to go wrong. Your character doesn't know how much or how often to give a herbal remedy. This leads to them making things far worse. Also possible to go wrong. Your character is using a push tiller in a rocky area. The tiller hits a large rock and bends the tiller tines so badly that the tiller is unusable. Unlikely to go wrong. Your character is gifted a sweater that was knitted by their grandmother. They believe it's ugly, and they're scared the other kids will make fun of them. They sneakily get the sweater up against the wood stove to light it on fire and ruin it. If they get caught, they will be in trouble. If they light it on fire, they could be burned or even cause a house fire. Also unlikely to go wrong. Your character misidentifies an animal print. They believe they have found a skunk print and follow it. When they catch up, they find the print was actually made by a baby bear and their mother is not happy to see your character near their baby. Your character could get mauled. Improbable, but still technically in the realm of possibilities. Your character took up carpentry. While making their first house, they forget the very important step of securing the frame to the foundation of the house. They have strong winds in the night, and when they come back in the morning, the frame of the house has collapsed. Also improbable, but still technically in the realm of possibilities. Your character is learning how to work on a tractor and slips while it's running. They get their arm caught in the equipment. They will need to call for help. If they are lucky, they will get out of this with an embarrassing story. If they're not lucky, they could lose their arm, or worse, this could be deadly. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy wordsmithing!